So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this session. And I'm pleased to be the first one to present. And we've been informed that we even have more time to present. So this afternoon, I'm going to share with you our experience in non-revenue water monitoring and addressing. So I'm going to present to you the benefits of the house-to-house survey for non-revenue water reduction in the raw water supply of Rwanda. And this is an activity that was done through a project called the Soko Yuzima project. It's a USAID funded project that was awarded to Water for People. It's a 5-year project with a budget for 21 million from USAID and 2.3 million from the partners, consortium members as co-share. We're working in 10 districts through 3 strategic objectives. The first one is on improved wash governance. The second one is on improved drinking water services. And the last one, but not least, improving sanitation and hygiene products and services. We are a consortium of 5 organizations led by Water for People, as I said. But we're also working with IRC, CARE, Rhue, and IA International. So as we all know, to achieve our project, especially our second strategic objective, we are supporting the private rural water operators in developing strategic plans and to reduce non-revenue water as one of the burden to achieve universal service, but also sustainable services. So these plans are guiding various activities aimed at managing and reducing water losses. I don't have to repeat to you, I'm sure we are all experts, the definition of non-revenue water. It's the water that is not paid by anyone. So as a background, Rwanda, the rural water subsector has been confronting many challenges, and one of it is high investment costs for water supply construction, mainly due to the topographic conditions of our country, but also poor cost recovery and inadequate services that is not reaching everyone. In 2010, the government decided to shift from community-based services to public-private partnership, where the private operators are the one managing the water supply systems. However, we still observe improper management of the infrastructure, and it is affecting the service delivery. So this project has therefore been initiated to support the government of Rwanda and the local government in water service provision, especially in reducing the non-revenue water, which pose significant challenges in providing the service and also ensure the efficient service delivery in rural areas. I don't have to comment on the picture on the left side. We know what it is. These are the activities that we do. I'm not going to enumerate all of them. I will mainly focus on bullet number 3, which is mapping customers to trace the unbilled and unregistered customers. The methodology that we follow, it's not only, as you saw, mapping is one of the many activities that we do. We normally work with the district and the private operator to select one water supply systems where we are going to demonstrate the list, all those activities. And then after selecting that one water supply system, we subdivide that water supply systems into sections that we call district metered area for us to trace the non-revenue water. After that, then we implement those lists of activities. So today our focus will be on the house-to-house survey to check on the household connectivity and the water that is being lost before reaching the meters. And then, of course, in the process, we hire enumerators that we train, and we use the software mWater. I'm sure some of you are familiar with mWater on the application and how to collect the data. And then we collect the data, of course, we do the analysis, we validate the data with the private operator and the districts, and then we analyze and we identify the actions needed to reduce the non-revenue water. Yes, this is a picture of our approach, the district metered area. A district metered area is a hydraulic isolated and completely metered section. So that means we take a section, a water supply system, we mainly subdivide it into 2 sections, and we put bulk meters so that we know which volume is going to which direction. And then we start to subdividing or tracing slowly where the water. You can see on this picture, That's an entire water supply system, typical rural water supply system, serving various communities. On the left side, we have one aspect, and the other side, we have one aspect. So the measures that we will apply on one side might be different, but the methodology is the same. First is to subdivide it. And then the approach has been demonstrated to be good and how it can be used to track the non-living water. So the primary aim of the focus of this study was to show the advantages of now the house to house, in addition to separating subdividing the water supply into two sections. What is the advantage of using DMA and house to house survey in reducing non-living water? This is our survey area. The blue dots are the households that were surveyed. And this is the questionnaire that we use. It varies from your identification of the household. Do you have a water supply system? Do you have household connection? Is your meter functioning? When was it installed? How much do you pay per month? How much you get water per day or per week or per month? And then all of that are the one that we collect and then analyze. And these are the findings. So from the findings in the 10 districts, I'm going to show you one water supply system, but the results are close, similar to in the 10 districts. We have surveyed 6,707 customers, and the daily access in those customers was 35%. And the number of meters in poor conditions was 31%. And the leakages of the water before it goes through the meter, before it is metered, was 186 leakages. So that means 186 households had leakages before the water reached the household. And we have tested 2,075 meter, and among them, 179 were inaccurate, did not show accurate data. We also have illegal collections, closing to 85 people, and the customer were satisfied, but not really satisfied, 20%, and the non-revenue water was estimated to be around 59.1%. These are some of the pictures, might be familiar from the area where you intervene. This is a typical household water, illegal and old and non-functioning water meters, and these are the big causes of non-revenue water. Might have skipped. Yes, after getting the findings, these are some of the actions that we have undertaken. Yes. We have provided on-job training to the private operators, especially their billing officers, and all the 85 identified customers were connected. So we came from illegal to now legal. The customers were fined, of course, because they were illegal, but they had to pay fines, and the total amount paid was equivalent to $3,000 US, and it was counted as revenue to the private operator as an additional revenue. And we had to replace the meters that were not functional and not providing accurate services, so the accurate readings, and 1,896 meters were replaced and were serviced and are now in use, and 179 meters were replaced entirely with new ones, and an amount of also 2,000 additional amount of revenue to the private operator, 2,600 was collected. And of course, the leakages were fixed. Those ones that were identified before reaching the household. 394 leakages were identified before the water got through the meter and was fixed. And that one also helped to have an additional revenue of $1,100 US. We also had penalties for those that were illegally connected, but also those that had late payment. 42 billing officers were trained on performing and implementing bill collections and fining and applying penalties. But also we also applied on job coaching to the people on how to read meters and identify abnormalities of those meters. In addition to that, we also conducted a community awareness, because most of the people we realized were not even aware that their meters were not functioning. So we conducted 20 awareness campaigns in 20 sectors to mobilize people on the efficient use of water, but also to monitor their water meters. The campaign aims to raise awareness of the negative impact of the non-revenue water, encourage reporting of the leakages, and also address illegal water usages. We have also trained them on the increase of the billing efficiency. The billing efficiency has been increased from 72% to 89%. Our goal with the target, with the project, is to reach at least 95% of efficiency. So we still have a journey to go. The revenue related to this increase was estimated around 4,500. But in summary, the daily water access increased to 42% from 35%. The revenue collected, all those combined revenues, reached around 11,000 additional revenue to the private operator. And the non-revenue water was reduced from 59 to 45.8%, which is equivalent to a reduction of 13.3%. So we can see that with the non-revenue water reduction, we can translate it into money, into economy, and people can see the advantage of reducing non-revenue water. So as a conclusion, a house-to-house survey provided essential information about the status of the meters, the leakages, the billing practices, the anomalies, and also the illegal water connectivity. We also have managed to address the issues identified, and it has been proved to be a wise investment. 11,000 is not few amount, but the private operator was very happy and substantially benefiting to both the private operator, as I said, and the customer, especially in terms of increasing the daily water access and return on investment. As a recommendation from the project so far, but we still have other recommendation to do. It is recommended to at least conduct a house-to-house survey at least twice a year. Customers that are suspected to be inaccurate should recommend or should request for a meter testing or get the private operator check their meters. It is also recommended to have a quarterly refresher training to the billing officer because of the turnover of their staff, but also a monthly community awareness to the community should be conducted to have tracing of those illegal connection and defaulting water meters and see if there are nothing to be addressed. Fine and penalties should be applied as indicated by the law to fight illegal connectivity, but also private operators in their management should conduct house-to-house survey in all their interventions, not only in our district. Thank you. That's what I had for you. And for more details or more informations, you have my details. I'm presenting this on behalf of my colleague who could not attend due to visa, he could not get the visa, but we are working together and yeah, it's my pleasure to represent him in this session. Thank you.
Questions?
Hi, thank you. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. This might be a naive question, frankly, but I think most of us probably want people to have access to water supplies. So for those who are metering illegally, because it's the only way they can access water at their homes, fines and penalties might be recommended, but is there also like something you would recommend to go hand in hand with that for getting water access to these people who right now may have essentially stealing it as their only option when it's necessary for life?
Okay. In our case, we realized those people that are illegally connected, it's not because they did not have a choice. They are doing it on purpose. They are stealing, they are bypassing. So in most cases, we realized they were actually working with the private operator, the technicians, to divert the connectivity and avoid monthly payment. So we haven't had cases where I understand maybe poor or very poor people who cannot afford paying the bill per month or even the connectivity. So yeah, we haven't got that because poor people, in most cases, in Rwanda at least, they are not connected. They rely on the basic, the public water point that is installed at the village. And sometimes they say, okay, I don't even have money to pay for the water point. I would prefer to go to the natural springs or the nearest lake or river. We didn't have a case of a very poor person with the household connectivity.
Thanks for sharing this work with us. It's great to see a success story. I wanted to put the $11,000 saved in perspective. That is per billing cycle?
No, from the period, we started this exercise last year. So it's a cumulative.
How long is the billing cycle? That's what I was trying to get at.
They do a monthly billing cycle, but this is not only 1 month. This is a cumulative from when we started to pilot this. We started last year in August, so maybe 12 months and more.
Okay, so that's about an annual savings?
1,000 per month.
Okay.
I was curious about the customer satisfaction. So before your excitement was about 20%. So did it change afterwards?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't have that on the slides, but I think yes. I don't have the figures, if maybe it was 20% to maybe 30 or 40, but it has increased, but I don't have the exact figure on the increase of the customer satisfaction. But yes, there was an improvement, especially after the community awareness.
Right.
campaigns.
Also just building on Madeline's question. So if I had an illegal connection and I now have a penalty I'm not able to afford, so do you just cut that connection?
Not as water for people, not as super easy. We just report to the private operator,
Right.
because we do it with them.
Right.
We are just bringing the technicalities and how to do it, but it's up to them to reinforce the laws. So in most cases, they were also surprised. How do we have? Who gave you this meter? How? And then of course they say, okay, it's up to you if you forgive them or apply penalties.
Yeah.
But it was realized that applying penalties was also one of the tools. It's a very hard tool, but it was one of the instruments to have people fight non-revenue, because our aim was to find non-revenue water. So people are now reporting and paying their bills and connecting legally.
Okay.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you for sharing this. So my question is about what, your experience. These are the things that you wouldn't necessarily put in a paper or in a presentation, but going after non-revenue water can often be very dangerous work for your field staff. You're revealing certain, and so actually we know very little in the literature also, we know very little about this space. So was the safety of your, can you just talk about maybe you're kind of tapping into these networks of people that have agreements that are informal. Could you talk about that a little bit in that experience doing this work?
Yeah, I agree with you. Good enough we haven't faced that situation. As I say, we are a project, maybe I didn't clarify. We are working through a system strengthening approach. We are not there to solve everything. We are just demonstrating people that you can apply these measures, these approaches, and you can achieve these successes. It's up to them now to replicate. This is only one water supply system that we piloted together with the district, the local government, and the private operator, and the national utility to apply the knowledge that we have in the books or we have read somewhere on the ground, and now we apply it and see the result. So the security was not really an issue because it was only one water supply system. It's not a day-to-day. We didn't conduct this maybe for 6 months or for 1 year. So yeah, there was some resistance from the private operator, but we were with their staff, especially the branch manager responsible for that water supply system. So the slides are not moving. So the fact that we are together with them maybe helped to reduce the security issues, but we didn't face any security concerns or someone attacking our staff. But you are right, this is only one piece of the non-revenue water. We have a lot of activities And this is what I'm just presenting the house to us, but we are implementing all of this, installing even the DMA. Like we have to purchase bulk meters, install them, protect them, install new fittings. We even have to rehabilitate the reservoirs, a lot of things. So by doing that, the communities were already familiar with our project and they know us. And the fact that they were seeing us with someone from the district maybe reduced the time. But of course, when we went into a house and they know that person, that this person is legally connected, created some tensions. But the enumerators, in addition, was a person living within the community. So it is a kid of that community. So they can't attack. So we try to use and work with the local people and the local government to avoid those kind of risks.
Thank you. Let's give Bruce another round of applause. All right, in water and health first for me, we're gonna patch in a virtual presenter. Let's see if this works. All right, Stephen, can you hear us?
Hi, I can. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, we can. Can you
All
share?
right. I absolutely can. Let's see. Let's make that work.
I will have to check. We'll have to check in the paper, yeah. And we can.
There. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Take it away.
Everyone can hear me all right? All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Rhue. I'm a doctoral candidate in the Department of Anthropology at The Ohio State University. And today I'm presenting a little bit, a big piece of my dissertation research, which is looking at child experiences of water insecurity. And in particular, today, I'm going to be looking at the comparison of child and parents' experiences within water insecure context. So it probably comes to no surprise for many people in this room that without insufficient unsafe water really shapes child routines and has profound consequences on their health and well-being. Without safe and sufficient water, children are unable to consume sufficient water and culturally desirable foods, which opens them up to malnutrition and dehydration. They're unable to consistently maintain their hygiene, so that opens them up to illness and disease. And it also, in many contexts, they also become responsible for managing household water, meaning their time is consumed by either carrying or managing water, which prevents them from play, attending school, meeting social expectations, and overall just exposes them to mental and physical fatigue. Now, we know this all very well, and every time we see the UN numbers come out, we know that it has a profound effect on child mortality. Over 1,000 children die every year. Over 1,000 children die from inadequate water and sanitation. But despite all that, research on water insecurity, particularly household water insecurity, is largely focused on the adult narrative, and therefore children's realities are often subsumed under those of their parents. Now, this is a little bit problematic because we do know that within the food insecurity literature, we know that children have experiences that are distinct from those of their parents. And the same is expected to be true with water insecurity. So therefore, the real objective of this research then is to examine how children experience and perceive their daily routines and well-being to be impacted by household water insecurity, and in turn then compare those experiences and perceptions with those of their parents. So that's really the main focus of my dissertation work. Now, this whole research was designed around the idea that we would conduct semi-structured interviews with mother-child dryads, and I'll explain why we're only using mothers in just a little bit, but the idea would be that we did interviews to explore how everyday routines were shaped by water, both with the mother and the child. We'd shoot for children around the ages of 5 to 11, which is right around middle childhood when children begin to become responsible for household activities like moving or using water. And we were going to focus on an area that we knew was low socioeconomic status and in areas that were vulnerable to water insecurity. Now, as there are no validated measures for children's water insecurity, we had to use we use the household water insecurity experiences scale for an objective measure of household water insecurity. And for those of you who don't know, the household water insecurity experience scale is a 12-item scale validated for use in low middle income countries that measures experiences with household water insecurity. And a score of 12 or more on the scale indicates a water insecure home, while a score of 11 or less indicates a water secure home. We also collected data on household demographics, what resources the household had available to them, the infrastructure, and things like that. Now, the whole idea is that this project of mine was guided by eco-cultural theory, which really posits that a child's participation in daily structured routines and activities is the single most important influence on their development. And therefore, we would just adapt that and focus on how does water influence a child's routines and daily activities? Because we know with water, they're allowed to do some things, and without water, they absolutely can't do many things. So the methodology we adopted is from ecocultural theory, and we had 2 interviews. We had the ecocultural family interview, and we followed a model by Dunn and adapted the adult version of that interview to be appropriate with children. They largely covered the same topics, but the language is more appropriate, and they were more tuned to the sensitivity of doing research with a child. Now, the research itself was carried out in Belém Pará, Brazil. And some of you may have heard of this because that's where the next UN climate meeting will be held in 2025. The city is about 1.3 million inhabitants, and it actually has a relatively high rate of piped water, but that varies significantly from neighborhood to neighborhood. There's drastic comparisons between a very high income neighborhood and then very low income neighborhoods, which is often what are called baixadas. So these are very low lying parts of the city where they are known for risk of flooding, poor infrastructure, very little access to trash collection, sewage, and waste regularly accumulate in the canals, which if you can see in one of those pictures, is one of the defining features of these baixadas, as that they have all of these canals that kind of crisscross throughout these neighborhoods, and they are very often they're in poor condition and they're just dilapidated, filled with trash, fecal matter, everyday runoff. They're not great conditions, but these areas are very well known for having interruptions to water in water service. So this became our field site, and the households we pulled from all live in these baixada areas. Now, I should also mention that the participants for this project were recruited as a part of a much larger project, which looks at child maternal health over the course of the first 2 years of life. So a lot of the mothers we were already working with for some time. And so that's why we're only focusing on mothers and their children as opposed to expanding it out to be any parent or guardian, is that we were working with a population of just mothers and children. Now, let's give a little bit of an overview of the actual sample that I had. So the transcripts that I collected from the interview narratives were going to be analyzed using the constant comparative narrative. And I thought this was appropriate because this allows you to compare and contrast narratives iteratively and recursively with one another. So particularly when we're looking at how do child and parent narratives differ, comparing those child interviews to the mother interviews. Any survey data we collected was categorized and really analyzed just using simply Excel. Now, overall, we had about eight male children and 16 female children participate, and they were ranged from ages of 5 to 10. The mothers were anywhere between, it's supposed to be 22 and 43. Largely, they were either partnered or married, and most of these mothers did not work. They were mostly stay-at-home moms. The households we were generally in relied largely on municipal water for both everyday needs and general needs. Per HWISE, about 50% of our households were classified as water secure and 50% were considered water insecure. So we had a nice split right down the middle. Although these households, once again, they don't have access to a lot of resources, their income was largely no more than $355 per month, which it doesn't go very far in the context that people are living in. Now, that being said, a lot of these are this is all very preliminary analysis as I am going through my interview transcripts. We have dozens of hours of audio. So a lot of this is being drawn from interview notes, memos, and very preliminary analysis. But what we really began to see is that within the context of how mothers and children use water every day, there's a very similar routine and shared experiences. So more or less, mothers and children both wake up at the same time, and they will, once they wake up, they will get ready for the day with a bath. Sometimes this means mothers will go first, other times it means children will go first, and oftentimes younger children would bathe with older children just to save time and water. And then everyone would sit down and have breakfast before either going to school, which is what the children would do, or mothers would continue to do household chores, which is almost always laundry, dishes, and food preparation. So there was a lot of water intensive usage in the household because they were always washing clothes and getting ready for the next meal. And the washing became particularly important because it is so very warm in Belen. It's about 86 to 90 degrees every day. The clothes often get dirty and they have to be washed constantly. Now, children go to school and they would then either come home and play or study for a little bit. Sometimes this play involved water, and I will get back to that a little bit in just a little bit. And then there was the routines converged back again, where dinner was, everyone had dinner, so the water that was used to prepare dinner was had. There would be another round of bathing and hygiene again. This is often where children and parents would get ready for the evening to sleep. Bathing was often important at night because it was so hot that this helped cool everyone down so they could sleep in the evenings. And then this is where mostly children would brush their teeth, drink water before going to bed. Now, that being said, children had very few household responsibilities where there were chores or when they were home. They were not expected to carry or fetch water in this area because of the very high levels of piped water. And if you needed water, it could be delivered to you on a bike service, or someone would come around on a truck and bring you water. So in this case, children did not participate in household water chore activities, and they also were not required to carry water like in many other water insecure contexts. Both mothers and children felt that it was very important to drink water and engage with water for both health and well-being. One element that came up many times was that if they drank water, it kept them from being ill. It was important to wash their hands. Bathing was not only good to keep clean, but once again, to keep themselves cool. And that was in particular important for mothers to make sure that the children had the ability to bathe. Now, that being said, these households often experience the most common element of water insecurity these households experienced were interruptions to water. And once an interruption to water happened, or there was any other issue with water, such as low pressure or poor water quality, everyone in the household experienced this. So there was no really escaping it. Everyone knew when the water was shut off, when the water wasn't flowing well out of the faucets, or when it had sediment in it, when it had a bad odor, or it had some yellow discoloration. Everyone in the household experienced the same experiences. So there really wasn't much buffering against that. Now, where the differences really come in is that despite these very shared routine and experiences of using water for getting up, bathing, drinking, having breakfast and dinner, children didn't seem to be very bothered by this. Now, and this is really represented by one of these quotes that I obtained from our children. We were working with them. We often used drawings as a way to initiate conversations with the children before going into our larger interviews. And this child in particular is describing the colors that she used about the emotions that she associates with water. Green represents calm because you need to be calm if you don't have water. Yellow is happiness because water makes you happy. Orange represents confusion because you're confused as to why you don't have water. And this is once again when she's referring to why these interruptions happened, which would happen quite frequently, anywhere from once or twice to 3 times a week. And they could be out for as long as an hour, or as short as an hour, as long as maybe an entire day. So children acknowledged these interruptions, but were not terribly bothered by it. They did tend to express more concern around water outside the home, where they were unsure where the water was coming from and why there were issues with water to begin with. In particular, school came up many times. They were unsure of the water quality at school. They were unsure why they weren't allowed to drink water sometimes. Mothers, on the other hand, really expressed far more worry about water, and particularly because it interrupted their daily routines far more, because they were responsible for everything that involved water, as far as washing dishes, prepping food, and of course doing laundry, which was always an issue. And interruptions, once again, were one of the main issues, because when the water would be turned off, it would often come back with that discoloration, that sediment, and that smell that I was talking about earlier. And the only way that many of the households could cope with this is by turning on all the faucets in a home and then running the water for about a half an hour before the water finally cleared out again. And then it was perceived as safe to use for cleaning, bathing, and even light cooking. Although most of the time, mothers reserved any water from cooking would be used for bought water. Now, as I'm sort of still in the midst of analyzing all my data and getting it together, one thing that's really standing out, as with food insecurity, this really suggests that children have varied experiences that are distinct from those of their parents, and that parents and children are not always aware of each other's experiences. In this case, parents were not always aware of children's experiences at school with water. They were not always aware of children's children's playing with water and how much the water they used when they were playing. Once again, children are aware of issues with water, but they express far less concern than their parents. And I think that indicates a very high level of, or not a very high level, but it's significant parental buffering and successful household coping strategies to ensure that children always had water. And in particular, I think this was in relationship to the fact they always had drinking water available. If they hadn't always had drinking water available because there was such a culture of buying water in these communities, I think that the children would have been more distressed by interruptions to water and not being always able to bathe or clean clothes when they needed to. Now, this is also really important because it furthers our understanding of intra-household experiences. There have been very few papers that include children's experiences of water insecurity in the first place, and then very few papers actually compare children to adults' experiences. In fact, largely we continue to focus on intra-household variation with adults, and now we finally got a little bit of data on children. This also really highlights its implications for policy intervention, as because children are having different experiences, we can't design effective policy for children or interventions without actually including their voices in research. And that is what I have. So I just wanted to say thank you all for listening to my presentation and to acknowledge everyone who's helped me from the Department of Anthropology, the University of Sao Paulo, my field team in Belém, and of course, the funding provided by the National Science Foundation and the Ohio State University. So thank you. I don't think I can hear anything. Let me see if I stop sharing.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, this was really interesting. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was curious about what the participants felt when you would have said, oh, I also want to understand how children feel. Like, was that considered something important locally there, or was that something new, or yeah?
So again, because we'd been working with these mothers for some time as a part of a larger ongoing project, the mothers were very open to having, if their children wanted to participate, of course, for them to share their experiences, because they themselves were very concerned about the water that they were always exposed to. In particular, one mother was very adamant that because of the water that their kids had been showering with, they had gotten parasitic diseases. She'd taken them to the doctor, and somehow they'd gotten a parasite that's normally ingested through water. And she was like, oh my goodness, I'm always so careful. We always use the bought water for drinking, which is normal store-bought water from any supermarket. She was really concerned, like, well, how did my children get sick? And what she eventually came to the conclusion of is that those children had been playing in the shower and they'd been drinking little bits of the shower water, which is basically unfiltered, untreated water straight from the municipality. And that was likely what made them sick. So they were very happy and very open to having children participate. Now, the children themselves, it was a mixed bag of how interested or engaged they were at first. But the participants were always willing to have us speak with their children if they wanted to.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. I don't know if you answered it at the beginning, but I'm wondering how the children answer would shift the policy? Like, what impact would the children have on the future policy? I don't really get that.
What, I'm sorry, if I understand the question correctly, it's what impact would having child's perspectives on household water insecurity have on policy?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I can speak to that from previous research, and some of the literature really shows is that there are not many evaluations of these programs. So when there have been evaluations of a wash intervention specifically designed for children, or specifically designed for a community, what they often find is they're not designed with children in mind, whether that is the tap stands that they implement in a community, because children can't access those. They cause lines, people get violent around the tap stands, or children are preyed upon at these tap stands. Or if they or if they implement community toilets, that these toilets are not designed for children. They're too big, they're too dark, they're scary. They're also, again, avenues for children to be preyed upon by strangers. So what it consistently shows is that oftentimes policy goes for a one solution fits all. And we know that doesn't even necessarily work for adults, as their needs change with age and ability, but it certainly doesn't always work for children at all either. And if we don't know what children are experiencing, we have no way of actually designing effective physical intervention or social intervention that benefits children and a household equally.
Thank you. Hi, this was a really fascinating presentation, really great work. I'm curious how the experiences of water issues at school came up in these interviews, and if people are thinking, if you are thinking about measuring that, if you can disentangle the experiences from the household, from school settings, and what would that look like in practice of trying to measure that?
Yes, so I think so. For the most part, the children in these households were very, very used to the interruptions to water that they would experience, and the discoloration and the sediment, the dirty water. They just grew up kind of living with that, and it was very normalized for many of them. So it just became a part of their everyday routine. But because their parents went to such lengths to always make sure that they'd be able to bathe first or have clean water to drink, they weren't as concerned with the household. But we did ask about school, because outside the home, that's where they would spend the most of their time. And then that's where children would be less sure about the water. And we asked specifically, okay, well, do you always have water at this school? No, they don't always have water at this school. Do you like the water at your school? No, sometimes it's dirty, sometimes it has a weird taste to it. Sometimes the teachers have to bring their own water. So we began to get this pretty good idea that school was a much more uncertain environment, and partially because of the way schools are set up in Brazil. Some teachers are completely responsible for all of their resources. Some schools are very small. It really depended on the access that they had. Now, we would like to have investigated, but our IRB did not extend that far, and that was going to get into something far more complicated. But it does need to be looked at, not only because I think we need to begin really thinking about water insecurity, not only at the household level, but then immediately outside the household level as well, particularly when it comes to children and schools. But we just didn't have the ability or the time to investigate that within a school. And I think it's pretty easy to separate it out. The children were very straightforward about, this is what happens with water when I'm at home, and this is what I'm not liking about water when I'm away at school.
The title of the presentation is about child-parent routines. I was wondering if you have any data from fathers, and if so, does it look different from the data you have with the mothers?
I do not have any data from fathers, largely because the larger study we were a part of focused on the mothers and children. Fathers were often not available to us at any point during the day, as they were often always working. And within the context of Brazil and these baixadas, moms were going to be the ones responsible for the household and the water. So we just didn't have, of course, it would be silly for me to not recognize that the father might have a different experience with their child than a mother, but we just didn't have the ability or the access to fathers to ask that.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round.
Thank you.
Sorry, switching back to zooming the room here. Figure this out. So,
Your Zoom skills to the test.
yes. All right. Up next, we have Justin Stoller. Wait, let's make sure this works first. Yeah, perfect.
Dock this Zoom toolbar somewhere. Okay. All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Thanks for being here this afternoon. I know I stand between you all and happy hour, so do the best we can here. I'm Justin Stoller. I'm professor of geography and sustainable development and public health sciences at the University of Miami down in Florida. I'm also the new chair of a water community that some of you may know as the HWISE-RCN, the Household Water and Security Experiences Research Coordination Network, that recently ended its NSF funding and is now transitioning into the Water and Security Experiences Community of Practice, or WISE-CP, with the institutional backing of the American Association of Geographers. Still the same people, just with a new name and some light branding that will be rolling out this winter. And I want to acknowledge that what I'm presenting is absolutely not mine or the work of any single person, but rather the work of this leadership team listed here, particularly Wendy Jepson and Amber Pearson, who are coordinating this project, and dozens of engaged researchers from across our network. Awkward pause. One more time with feeling. Okay, we're going to use the keyboard.
Is that working?
Or maybe
I think, you know what happened. I'll try this. There you go.
Okay, we're rolling. Putting my clicker skills to the test. All right. If you haven't heard of us, we're a community of practice of over 300 scholars and practitioners bound by our common values and ambition to mitigate water insecurity around the world, like most of you. We do this by taking a broad view of how people experience water insecurity that reflects themes that most of you probably study and is grounded in interdisciplinary theory and methods, mentorship and professional development, community advocacy, and team social science. The scholarship that blooms from those roots covers quite a bit of ground across the social health and engineering sciences, unintended. Now, much of the HWISE community's early theoretical work was led by Dr. Amber Rudich at Arizona State University, who in 2023 was awarded the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, also known as the Genius Award, for her seminal water and security research. If you don't know her, you should. She is wonderful. Over the years, our community's collective scholarship has produced a whole new literature about how household water insecurity relates to a wide range of social, economic, and health outcomes, as well as policy and practice opportunities to mitigate these effects. Now, most people are familiar with our work because of the HWISE scale, cross-culturally validated measure of water insecurity that was created through a partnership with 50 motivated collaborators working across 28 sites globally. There are now a set of WISE scales that provide simply worded survey tools to quantify how frequently households and individuals experience problems with domestic water. And they've featured in several of your posters and presentations this week, including Stephen's that you just saw, which is really great to see. So we're now applying what we've learned internationally to address longstanding and underappreciated forms of water insecurity here in the US, and ultimately to build a validated scale for the US, and eventually one that is validated across high-income countries. The HWISE High-Income Country, or HWISE-HIC project, formed in 2023 and began collecting data this past spring. Now, this project aims to spotlight the 1 million+ Americans living without running water. People don't know those stats. In the US, this isn't just a rural problem. Those without running water are nearly as likely to live in urban areas and more likely to be part of minoritized communities or be renters. We're also confronting similar themes that limit safe water access around the world, things like workforce challenges, affordability issues, rising distrust in service providers, and disproportionate effects on the most vulnerable. As the saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Fortunately, we're well equipped to navigate these issues as this work comes on the heel of substantial formative research on water insecurity in high-income contexts that began over a decade ago by our collaborators. So our project goals are twofold. First, to validate a household water insecurity scale for the US, and eventually a cross-culturally validated scale that can be used across high-income contexts internationally. Second, as we've done with the original HWISE scale, we aim to test a variety of hypotheses about the causes and consequences of water insecurity in high-income settings in order to make policy-relevant recommendations to government agencies and utilities, of course, to improve equity and access. We're using the same scale development framework that was used to create the original HWISE scale. But we completed the initial item development stage and are currently in the throes of community-based data collection in water insecure communities that will be iteratively used for scale development and evaluation over the next year. So although we won't have the final results for a while, the rest of these slides will walk you through our process and present essentially a proof of concept of what we expect to achieve next year. But first, you're probably wondering, where are we collecting all this data? So phase 1 data collection is actually winding down this month with 5 of 7 sites already completed, the ones that are bolded here. And most of the core project team is actually convening at another workshop just next week to assess that initial harmonized data set. So far, all the reports from the individual site PIs have really been positive. Things are going well. Just going to check in and see where we're at. Next year, we'll expand to another 12+ sites. And there's actually a second list that's filling out of European sites that's coming together through Katie Meehan's leadership at King's College London. So this list is going to continue to grow, and we anticipate a phase 3 launching in late 2025 to smooth out geographic and demographic representation in the data set. We'll come back to that at the end. Now, all the project sites are implementing the same core modules about water insecurity, which is the set of scale candidate items, a module about water supply and consumption, similar to what you all implement in your sites, and a few short validation modules. So the core is relatively short, can be completed in 5 to 10 minutes, but most sites are also implementing some of our standardized optional modules, depending, of course, on what that particular community's needs are and the local PI's research interests in a given place. Now, our criteria for scale building follow best practices for validity, unidimensionality, making sure we're measuring just a single construct, and reliability. We also aim to preserve the spirit of the original HWISE scale that was developed for low and middle income countries by focusing on items that are universal experiences of water insecurity in the US, even if they are not comprehensive of water insecurity. In other words, we want this scale to contain items that represent the construct of water insecurity, broadly construed, but that would apply to anyone experiencing it in the United States or in other high-income settings. So here are the 19 items that are in our water insecurity module. Now, the number 19 is actually already scaled down from the 30-something that were used in the original development of the HWISE scale in low and middle income countries. So we've learned things over the years. So we are also pushing the theoretical envelope here by organizing these 19 candidate items into the 6 bolded constructs that you see here, with the goal of reducing the 19 items to a smaller number that covers as many of these constructs as possible. Of course, we hope that this analysis goes well and that we have choices to make during that item retention process. And spoiler alert, it looks like we're going to have that luxury. Now, earlier this year, we administered our survey to a nationally representative US online sample to learn more about our modules, but also with the intent of using nationally representative data as an additional validation step. Because our forthcoming metrics will be built from data from water insecure communities with lots of affirmation and variation, we want to also validate the new scale against more average US households. So again, that won't happen for a while, but we can use this nationally representative data that we already have to explore the viability of scale building using exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis. These are data reduction techniques that distill large variable sets into synthetic factors, and assessing the validity and reliability of these preliminary or hypothetical scales. Remember, the actual scale that we're aiming to build will be driven by the harmonized multi-site data set. Now, after all the usual data cleaning, et cetera, we began by computing an exploratory factor analysis using all 19 items just as a baseline to see our starting point, right? So this is basically throwing all 19 items into the kettle, seeing what we get. So in scree plots like the one that you see here, we're essentially looking for an elbow where the curve turns and goes horizontal. And we want to retain the number of factors to the left of that, ideally with eigenvalues greater than 1. We're trying not to get super technical. Eigenvalues represent the proportion of variance captured by a factor, okay? So this elbows at the third factor, suggesting that we can retain 2, right? We're aiming for 1. We want unidimensionality, but we're starting with 2. Even though that eigenvalue is really high for factor 1 compared to the rest, there's clearly something going on with this second factor, but that's okay, right? The fact that we even approached unidimensionality with the full 19 item set is actually a testament to the hard theoretical work of the HWISE collaborator team over the past year in developing this module in the first place. So that was very reassuring. But again, ultimately, the goal is to reduce these items to a smaller unidimensional set. So we explored the frequency histograms. And as we expected, even though there's variation, there's lots of zeros, lots of non-normal distributions. These are things that we have to contend with in the analysis. We also see that 4 items had a slightly different distribution with more frequent responses up at the higher end of the scale. In other words, daily experiences or near daily. These are quality and concern, both from the water quality construct, and angry and cope. These are from the emotions and adaptive coping constructs. So it's no surprise, right, that as shown on the left, these 4 items had among the highest mean frequency. Okay. On the right, you see the loadings from a 2-factor solution. Again, I'm going to try to break this down for you. We have a lot of options loading at 0.6 or higher. On the first component, those are the ones shown here in green, which is very promising. Right? Before I come back to that, there are 2 other interesting things that we see here. First, the 2 affordability items highlighted in red load very weakly on both factors. So our working hypothesis is that paying for water besides your tap water and struggling to pay your bill, which is what these 2 items represent, are phenomena that don't necessarily work well with a 4-week recall period, which is how the scale is designed. Many water bills, for example, like the one I pay, come quarterly. And so this may not be viewed as an issue when respondents are focused on the past 4 weeks. So we're asking about affordability in some of our community sites using a 12-month recall, and we're contemplating the reality that this might be something that needs to be a separate scale with a separate time frame. Second, you can also see that the 2 water quality items highlighted in yellow, concern and quality, start to come through as a correlated second dimension, suggesting that they're capturing something slightly different from the remaining items that we think represent water insecurity. 2 other items in yellow, angry and cope, are also more related to this quality construct. That's something we're still needing to dig into. So we're already observing some nuance in our module, and we'll be paying particular attention to how these issues shake out with the community-based data. But again, our goal is to reduce these water insecurity items to a unidimensional scale. And it turns out that we do have several options across the remaining 4 constructs that satisfy our criteria, working with what you see highlighted in green. So this is where theory and method converge. These data yield multiple combinations of items that satisfy our scale criteria and pass the validity checks. Here's one such example of a potential 4-item scale that draws from 4 of the 6 theoretical water insecurity constructs. Remember that for now, we're passing on quality, which seems to load on a separate factor, and affordability, which may require this alternative temporal framing we just talked about. So those 4 items are having to bathe outside the home, which is from the adaptive coping construct, experiencing water source interruptions from a reliability construct, having no water at all at home, quantity construct, and worrying about having enough water from the emotions construct. So the fit statistics are generally very good, and this hypothetical scale passes our tests for content, predictive, and convergent validity, glossing over all this for time. But we can talk about later if you really want to get under the hood. So in summary, the HWISE US and HWISE high-income country scales are being rigorously built from community-level data. Candidate scales are going to be iteratively refined over the next year as new communities are surveyed, are integrated into the harmonized data set, and then will be validated against the national data set that we were just looking at. And analysis of that harmonized data from our initial communities is actually going to happen next week. Trying to squeeze that in before this conference, but just weren't able to do it. And phase 2 data collection is going to begin in January. And if you are working in a community that might be a good fit for inclusion in one of our upcoming phases, please reach out to us. This is all designed with survey modules pre-programmed into Survey CTO, an open source survey program. We've got all the modules kind of in the can, IRB materials, protocols, all ready to go. It's actually really easy to bring you on board. The project was designed that way on purpose. let's definitely talk. I want to end by acknowledging that this work leverages amazing collaborators and co-funders who are all really collegial and passionate about this work. We couldn't do it any other way. Thank you for listening. And if you're not already on our listserv, you can still sign up on our old website, the HWISE-RCN website. We'll be migrating to the new site this winter, but if you sign up there, we'll capture you. There should be continuity in our communications. Thanks so much for being here.
So unfortunately, here in the United States, we have a pretty shameful past of not extending any water systems into our tribal communities. So oftentimes, so a lot of times we're talking about high-income countries, we're talking about systems that have fallen into disrepair. And so there's a lot of just lack of connection lack of systems, because we have part of our genocidal ways have been to not give these communities any water at all. And so my question is, and there's so much heterogeneity in how these different indigenous populations are and how they interact with water. And so as this rolls out, how has that consideration been taken in? Because my gut is we can't just assume the tribal communities are the same as our inner city or other one, so just.
Yep. That's a great question. And our site lists aren't final, and there are still some that are pending. So we're working in some indigenous Alaska communities. We're trying to get a community in Hawaii online. That's actually something I'm trying to get going in the next 6 months. Our partners at Arizona State University have connections with Dig Deep and are trying to work with Navajo Nation to get in there. It's like no promises. Maybe we could talk about that afterward. So we're trying to capture all of that. But we are explicitly trying to work in communities that we know are struggling with heterogeneous water challenges, specifically because that's where we're going to see the variation to be able to build the strongest scale. So in progress, but an ongoing challenge. Absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of your presentation, so apologies if you discussed this earlier.
Still glad you're here. Thanks.
So, like high-income countries, these classifications are quite fluid and are changing. And I was kind of wondering what you would think about from my experience in food security, it can be a very sensitive delineation. And if people are trying to transition into high income, what you would recommend that some countries do the regular HWISE and some countries do a different scale? What's the kind of sensitivity around that, losing like a continuation of like data if you're trying to do national monitoring? And like, I don't know if you thought about how that would be like received by,
Received by, from the government's perspective?
Countries that are in MICs that are then, from the food security perspective, I know a lot of people don't like these classifications very much, right? And having a different scale for that context can cause a bit of tension. And having these two different scales, have you thought about what that might mean? And if people transition from low income or 1 year transition into a middle income or upper middle income country, what that might kind of, how that should be communicated, what scale becomes appropriate. I don't know if you kind of that as I'm trying to.
Okay, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
And we can chat after, but we're less interested in being able to categorize people's water insecurity level or situation and like put them in a particular bucket, and more interested in shining a spotlight on this invisible problem that a lot of governments don't even realize is happening, particularly in certain communities that are kind of pushed into the shadows or shoved out of public water systems in the first place, and be able to generate baseline data to show governments where there are opportunities to expand access, not just on moral and ethical grounds. We wish that would be enough, but also if all they're interested in is billing, right? And creating like same kinds of cost recovery models, right? That everyone struggles to deal with all over the world, to keep water systems online, places to deploy decentralized water systems where modern pipe water systems are probably never going to be deployed, right? To figure out how to do that, to figure out where are the best opportunities to improve water access. So don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
my question is super clear in that regard. I understand the purpose of it, right? I understand that what you're trying to get at. I think what I'm thinking about is in the longer term, as countries transition, as places change, what you sort of envisage for the scale and the kind of delineation between the regular HWISE and then the HWISE for high income. You know, like I understand that where it's shining problems or maybe specific, or you see it's shining specific problems for those communities. But I think it's just that. I think what I'm concerned about from like a political perspective about who uses what and what that means and what that signifies for them. Okay.
You're right. I'm gonna give you the idealist answer though, which is that we measure all the stuff and we figure out how to deploy the right solutions so that we don't need HWISE scales anymore, right? That's gonna take a while, right? But yeah, I'll stop there. Let someone else ask a question.
Thank you, very interesting. We're talking a lot about communities where we can address problems. I would expect problems of homelessness to show up. Will this scale address this concern as well?
There is at least one, I think, 2 sites that are explicitly surveying unhoused populations, and they're so much more challenging because of the wider variety of water sources that they're using, being able to track down people and link them to place, right, when they are more mobile. But that is built into our sample. Yes, great question.
Thanks for the presentation. From a practitioner working in the US context, and I only just have vague familiarity with the HWISE scale, so maybe this is just a basic question on how it can be used. It seems obvious that it can be used in academic presentations, that it's in all kinds of posters and stuff like that as a tool for academic researchers. For policymakers or for practitioners, particularly in like high income country context, I have noticed observationally that practitioners have much less robust monitoring and evaluation programs than in the international context. So how do you envision HWISE scale being used for practitioners and for, government decision maker, policy makers? How is that maybe done for the lower middle income HWISE too? I don't know, because I don't really know.
You had the answer in your question. M&E is how we view these scales as one of the most important uses of these scales, right? Is to generate baseline information. And when there are service expansions, changes to building programs, natural hazards, like anything that causes a shock to the system that changes water access, a storm, things like that, to be able to then deploy these after the fact and see like how quickly are we actually bringing people back to previous service levels and things like that. So yeah, I think these scales have the most opportunity as an M&E tool. There are lots of other ways that they've been used that I can direct you to. Yeah. Sarah Young isn't here, right? But she was. Josh, do you have any of those beautiful shiny training manuals? There's a whole page in there explicitly about how they can be used in different contexts. He's digging into the bag, but he's out of them. Anyway, they're posted online. Let's trade information. I can direct you to that after.
Great. There's no other questions. Let's get Justin and our speakers one more round of applause. What's that? Oh, no. There was a session yesterday where 3 people didn't show up. Which is rare.
I'd love to introduce myself. My name is
It's a major issue this year. People, we asked them to confirm if they were coming. Some people said they were and didn't show up.
Can I have yes, let me dig it out. Make sure you
So I asked them about that. I spoke to Rhue, and she said that our data likely we do cards next year.
No, not today.
Well, try to publish it before the data comes out. So with just that. Just the I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, that might be. We just, it's a matter, yeah, I think it's the way down to there's, so I think there's two. That are, you can work with now, and then you can be ready to go. And we'll go through, you know, see if it's ready. Sorry.
Yeah, but I have. Yeah, I'm Natalie. I really.
All Western.
Yeah, I know. But I have a question. So I really want so I was weird. So I'm.
One question here, when you talk about data, that means like.
Just after household dynamics. Household. Looking for that. The islands that's being I think in the US also. Actually. Just mention about this, some of us think this is.
I bet if or there's no.
So there's a lot of. What she did in the. Using their So. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think articles on short report, I was like, I swear that had done something.
Us, the teach live versus our lives.
Things about, you know, like. It's doing it. The overall objective is to think, you know, you're sorry. Umar is security, but that we don't want to access the. Yeah, so it was great to hear that partnership. I just that's what that is. Because it is trying. Like still, maybe, you know, take 30 minutes to add. And the same results, and there's multi-site cities about the same results. And if you decide what was happening, it's not be that so bigger. think they're having this. Yeah, so they're I've done this.
All those other molecules and
They've already had all actually done. Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
Because we're trying, they're trying to. It's about household water and so but wait, who's featuring you now? Not me specifically, but the company.
Oh, you're deep. Okay,
Yeah.
then actually, that's great. So we have 985 surveys from the application. Deep has funded the research, so that, you know. Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just.
Oh, man, I'm sorry, I funded that in. I know. I'm Natalie.
Natalie, okay.
Our whole team is out in Fort Defiance in Chinle. We're, so we apply the HWISE, that's what I'm trying to make it culturally. So tell me your name.
Leticia, I was the data from.
Hi, so,
I met with Reese.
yes, Reese and I told Reese I was like texting her when I was coming here.
Yeah.
But point is, we do have, so my comment, sorry, I get very passionate about the fact that, like,
I'm really.
you know, we call it data genocide because the fact we have such little information about how water access has existed in communities for so long, like, that's intentional, right? Like, let's, so one of the things we're finding in our HWISE we're finding out about is that we're not doing a good job of saying, you know, whose water is here. So the data that we have, 985 homes in Fort Defiance area, we adapted the laundry question. Because most people don't do laundry at all. They're trying to figure out how to use that. It only has shown 6% of people that are water insecure. Yeah.
Good.
Definitely.
I totally agree with you. I mean, to me, it's like 2 weeks is too much too. Yeah.
I do have a bit in the.
Yeah.
Stephen used to think it was also.
Yes,
recently,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me personally, and most of the people, oh, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that will continue. It's one of those things that I'm having trouble getting published. It's such a hard thing.
Right.
Right. Some of us that we just kind of let it. People are taking our companies apart. I don't get it. To talk to someone. He's using that line very
Yeah, laundry. We're using 11 right now.
So I think
I used to work in Kenya.
Score of 12. That I have yet to meet someone. Anyone, and I go back to their community. And they go find cultures to get that score. And they do watch. Everyone knows. I didn't know. So. Ignore it. Like scrub it out of your name.
Yeah.
Scores to quartiles, like. Not great benchmarks, but.
Yeah.
I'm gonna enjoy
Okay.
So you have like kind of a range of.
Okay. The other thing just to bring out in this conversation is, you know, a lot of things culturally, it's culture. Culturally, you're bringing out bad things by saying that things are not good. And that's not a very clear way of saying that, like, you know, we found that we go through the survey, we find out that people don't have water access, they're traveling 2 hours to get it, and then they say everything's great with their water. And so my concern is that the scale isn't also capturing their tendency to be like, oh, everything's fine, because you don't want to say things are not fine and bring on bad things.
So, yes, that is an issue. So what you're describing is that. Yeah, you work.
Yeah.
Psycho-emotional.
Yeah.
So. That's what we do. I wrote about this.
Okay.
I'm the non.
Like, I'm an engineer, so I, yeah.
I'm thinking about. Metrics and how like public metrics and so paper that. Different series of work.
Did you have that on your little? As a little slide. Yeah, it was a lot, it was a big slide, with a lot of.
It's called frontier or experience, like trying to look ahead. Like how do you make these guys, like what you do.
2022.
Which the next. Yeah. So you just. Severity is, so all these scales are kind of frequency, which things happen, but when they happen, how bad is it? So we've started testing, that's built into our modular for this project. We're asking everyone, recently asking each of if it was anything greater than 0. You follow up with how it's
Yeah, that I.
super easy, doesn't link to the model. And we can use it as weights and that's the way. Adaptation is we haven't gotten. We're going to do this thing.